As I continue to sit back and reflect on all the good, the bad, and the ugly that went down with my Carolina Panthers last season, I do come away thinking that we have many reasons to be optimistic, two of which I'm going to highlight in this video. I'm going to give you all two of my favorite players that are poised for a breakout season in 2023, and we're going to get into that right after this.
From the foe, you dig?
Welcome to The Way I See It with Amari Rashad. This is a Carolina Panthers fan channel. Please do me a favor by hitting the like button, and please make sure you subscribe as I am on my road to 1K. Trying to get this channel monetized. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get to these breakout players. Now, the first player I want to highlight is none other than our 6th round draft pick in the 2022 NFL draft, Amari Barno, out of Virginia Tech. Now, Amari Barno comes to us by way of Blythewood, South Carolina. So he is, in fact, a local guy. He is 6'5", 240 pounds. Now, the first physical trait outside of just his size that I want to highlight was the fact that at his immense size, he was able to run the fastest 40 of any lineman in his draft class with a 4.37 40-yard dash, which would, at this point, for all of my Madden fans out there, means that he is the 3rd fastest lineman in the game, only behind Brian Burns, a fellow Panther, and Kyron Johnson of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I want to move forward and highlight the fact that Amari Barno was only active for 9 games this year. And what did that mean? That means that on defense, he only played 51 total snaps, which was 9%. Now, why does that matter? Because outside of Brian Burns, we could not produce a consistent pass rush whatsoever, aside from the times where we rushed Frankie Louvu. Amari Barno playing only 51 snaps, 9% of the snaps, was 5th on the team in sacks and only a half a sack behind Yetur Gross-Matos, which is just absolutely terrible, man. For perspective, Yetur Gross-Matos played all 17 games, 846 snaps, and that was 73% of the total snaps that we played on the defensive side of the ball. Amari Barno only played 51 of that, being 9%, and he was only a half a sack behind the guy that we have as a starter opposite of our Pro Bowler. Now, that just gives you a little perspective for the jump that we could potentially see out of Amari Barno. Now, for perspective, a little more perspective, I think he could come in, and he could have potentially came in this year, but I especially think that he could come in and do it next year and have the same type of impact that the Detroit Lions' James Houston had when he came in, what was around the maybe the 9th game of the year. If you all are not aware, James Houston was drafted also in the 6th round, but he was inactive for majority of the season, all the way up into week 8 or 9, I believe, and he actually put up an NFL record 8 sacks in his first 7 games. And like comparative to Amari Barno, he only played 140 snaps on the defensive side of the ball. That was 31 of the potential snaps played in the respective games that he appeared in. I believe that if we would have allowed Amari Barno off the leash a little bit more, he would have been able to show his pass rush prowess a little bit further. We see that we line him up outside on the punt team. He is a gunner. He is 6'5", 245 pounds and running gunner. Now, that is similar to a lot of dominant pass rushers that we've had in the past. This was something that was brought to my attention by one of my Twitter followers that I truly do appreciate him enlightening me with this information. Not only has Amari Barno done this, but during his rookie season, Brian Burns, in fact, lined up and played gunner. Mario Addison, another Panthers great pass rusher of the past, lined up at gunner on punt return. And a name that many may not like, but you can't deny his overall ability and his impact on this team back in 2014. Greg Hardy, during his younger years in the league with the Carolina Panthers, also lined up at gunner. So if that is any indication of what is to come for this young pass rusher, that speaks for very good things in this young man's future, which leads me to say, what do I believe his expectations should be, or what are his expectations for me moving into the year 2023? Now, first of all, I think that he deserves, but first of all, he needs to earn a solid spot in the normal rotation of our pass rushers, or at least earn a solid spot where he comes in as a specialist, similar to how I mentioned James Houston, who is always in on obvious passing downs because of his advanced ability to rush the passer. He needs to use that 6'5" frame, that 4.3 speed at 6'5" to beat just about anybody around the edge. And I expect him to come in and play at least 35% of the snaps. I understand that he still is a 6th-round draft pick. He was that for a reason, and he does need to progress. But in his second season, I expect him to be able to at least show that he has progressed a bit, earn himself solid snaps, and to be able to be out there at least, a third of the defensive snaps played in his eligible games. Now, as far as his stat output, I know that this may seem like a high mark to reach, but I truly think that he can do it after seeing what I've seen from James Houston. I believe that Amari Barno is like as capable, if not better, than Houston. I believe that he could come in those 35% of those total defensive snaps, get himself 30 plus total solo tackles. But where he will shine at is on those obvious pass rushing downs, where he is able to just pin his ears back and go after the quarterback, use that speed, use his size, and just go back and sick him. I think if he is given and afforded the opportunity, he will be able to reach 10 sacks. Now, with that being said, that is my thoughts and my opinion for what I believe Amari Barno will be able to do moving forward for the 2023 season. And now we are going to move in to the next player, which is obvious as it is on the rundown. You all already know Terrace Marshall Jr. Now, Terrace Marshall Jr. was the 59th overall draft pick in the second round for us back in 2021. When we had gotten one of his guys, Joe Brady, to join our staff, I thought that he was going to come in and be an instant impact player, but that has not happened as of yet. Now, Terrace Marshall Jr. is 6'4", 200 pounds, out of Bossier City, Louisiana, and he went to LSU and played for what many think and many consider the greatest college football team of all time. Now, I want to highlight, as Terrace Marshall is not a rookie, it was not a rookie this past season. It was actually his second season. He will be going into his third season. I am going to highlight this past season and the ebbs and flows in which he had with the two different coaches that we had at the controls. Now, in the first 5 games under Coach Matt Rhule, Terrace Marshall was a pretty much a virtual no-show. He had lost his spot to a 6th-round draft pick in Shi Smith, and he was pretty much getting blanked and not getting on the field whatsoever. In the first 5 games, as you can see here, he only had 30 total yards, and if you equated for an average, he was getting less than 1 target per game, and that he was at 7.5 yards per catch. And through 5 games, he only had he was only getting 6 yards per game. Now, that's not anything like a fullback. You could line up a backup offensive tackle and he could go out and get 6 yards per game. Now, where the shift came was when we fired Matt Rhule. Steve Wilks came in. Although we kept Ben McAdoo at the offensive coordinator, it seems as though Sam Darnold coming back and the offensive philosophy shifting, the ability to run the ball increasing, and the play action game being there more consistently, Terrace Marshall just pretty much went on a tear and showed exactly what he can do in those final 12 games. Just 12 games, he had 460 yards, as opposed to in the first 5 where he only had 30 total. He was getting 3.5 targets per game, which is still not what I would like to see out of a featured wide receiver. But just juxtaposing that with what he was getting before the coaching shift, it's just amazing to see. He went from less than 1 catch a game to 2 catches per game, and his average yards per catch went from a measly 7.5 to almost 20 at 19.3 yards per catch, just showing that he has immense big play ability, and what I like to joke around and call him, be it baby Dez Bryant. He could potentially be that if he continues to develop and he continues to be a focal part of the offense moving forward, which is something that I hope Frank Reich decides to do, man. So although he was only able to get up in those final 12 games of the year 38 and like almost just about 38.5 yards, if you projected this entire 12 games out over this season, if you had projected this 12 games out with an additional 5 games on over there, he would have had maybe, you know what, 800 yards. That maybe would have got up to like 50 yards per game. You never know what could have happened, but him showing what he could do in those 12 games gives me a lot of confidence to believe that he could actually go out and do what he needs to do, man. So what are my expectations for Terrace Marshall in 2023? I believe Terrace Marshall will, for the first time in his career, almost double his output in catches and as well as targets, and I believe he will have 50 plus catches, over 1,000 yards, and as he has only scored 1 touchdown in his entire career so far, I believe that he will up that by 500%, man, and be able to, well, not you know what I get, up that you know what I mean, you know the math, up to 5 touchdowns, and just have an instant breakout season. Now, aside from just the numbers, something that I have to say about Terrace Marshall that has always irked me, because I know narratives are just that, they are just narratives and they are just things that people talk about. But in my head, the narrative that I can't ignore was the fact that Terrace Marshall Jr. was the 3rd leading receiver on what I mentioned earlier was the greatest college football team in the history of sports, man. Terrace Marshall Jr. is the only one of those 3 receivers that has not hit the league and been an instant superstar. Jamar Chase was Pro Bowl All-Pro from the moment he took his first snap in the NFL. Justin Jefferson has been just as good, if not better, being the absolute best wide receiver in the game this year. Those were the only 2 guys that were getting more targets than Terrace Marshall Jr. on this team. And for some reason, he has just not been able to find his footing in the NFL. I know a lot of that can be attributed to the fact that we may not have the trigger man. We don't have a Joe Burrow. Damn, we don't even have a Kirk Cousins. But I need to see something out of this guy, because it seems as though we got the short end of the stick. And like, I don't understand why that is. So narratively speaking, I need Terrace Marshall to validate why he was such a integral part of that team. Although he wasn't Jamar Chase, although he wasn't Justin Jefferson, he was a focal part of that passing attack back then in 2019 at LSU, and he needs to establish why he was that on this team, and I think that he will be able to do that in 2023. So with that being said, man, what do you all think about my 2 selections for the breakout players on both offensively and defensively that we have on the team moving forward into our 2023 season? You all leave your comments down below, man. Whatever you think about these guys. Did I get it wrong? Do you think it's somebody else? Whatever you all think, like I said, leave it down below. I'm Jamario Rashad. This is the way I see it, and I'm out. Peace.